Alright, let's talk brewing gear. So this is a mash tun. So when you get to do all grain, you end up doing a lot of your sugar conversion from the grain using just hot water instead of extract. So this is, as you can see, a generic igloo cooler. It's pretty big and it's heat really well. So got a little bazooka screen in there and kind of rigged it all together. But I will definitely be washing it because it's been sitting out in the garage. So step one of any brew operation is you wash all your gear out. This is a pot that I use primarily just for hot water because I have a main boil kettle right here. So for the mash tun, when you're done, you need to sparge out the liquid. So this is just a generic 18-inch pizza pan from the restaurant supply shop. And I went ahead and drilled some holes in it. And lo and behold, it fits right on there so that when you're dripping the water through, it doesn't make channels for the water to just basically wash out just clear water. In here you actually get the sugar. Inside of my brew kettle is where I store my wort chiller, and that's going to be important because when you have 5 gallons of hot sugary liquid, you need to get it cooled down as quickly as you possibly can so that it doesn't get contaminated. I've got a little beaker with a hydrometer. And this is so that you can check and see how alcoholic or unalcoholic your beer is going to be. Moving over here, I've got this little plastic jug. So this serves 2 purposes. When I'm, rinsing out the grain, I can dip the plastic jug in the water jug here and rinse it out. And then when I'm done, I actually use this as the blow-off container. The other thing that we have is we have a fermenter, glass fermenter. You can pick these up at any homebrew shop. I've got one of the little thermometers on there that's kind of right in the middle of where it's going to be. So nice day today, it's about 70 degrees. And then I bought this thing because with some types of yeast, it will tend to be a little bit aggressive. So just a simple blow off tube into this bucket will really work. Otherwise, you can use an airlock if you have something that's not too aggressive. You can also do this on a secondary fermenter. So I have about 2 or 3 of those glass fermenters. I've got one big mouth bubbler downstairs. It's a glass big mouth bubbler. The other thing that we won't use today, but we'll definitely use in the future, is an auto siphon with a nice long piece of tubing on there. So this is for transferring the beer into the secondary fermenter or into the keg when we're all done. Like I said, bottle brush. This will help scrub all the funk off of that guy. So you can soak it, you can scrub it, you can do a whole bunch of stuff to try to get some of the hop funk off. That's just yeast funk. I have never been able to get it off, but it doesn't really affect anything. This is something I bought a while back. I don't really use it. It would be for a blow-off tube, so you can pop it in there, and it kind of follows the contour of the fermenter. Sorry, brain fart. And of course, Irish moss. Use this stuff in the brew process. Anyway, let's start. All right, everything is washed out. We've got about roughly 3 gallons in our main boil kettle and getting that up to right around 160. And that's going to be for the mash. I've got the secondary kettle with the sparge water just going. It's kind of on medium, so that way it'll warm up a little bit, and by the time we're ready for it, it should be warm. Now, there's an important thing with the mash tun. So this sits out in my garage. So before you start using something like this, there's an advantage of using hot soapy water to wash it out. So the first one is, obviously, if it's sitting out in my garage, it's going to get all that dust and all the funk from the garage in there. But the other thing is that you kind of warm it up so that you can get it ready for the grain. So when the grain starts getting warmed up, you want to have that temperature as close to about 155 degrees as you can, and you want to hold it for about an hour, which is why these coolers are a great mash tun. Now, you could obviously get a setup where you've got something like this and you can control the temperature on a temperature gauge or something like that, but that's a little bit on the pricey side for people that are just getting into it. Biggest piece of advice I could give you is make sure you make friends with your local brew shop, because they will help you troubleshoot why this isn't working, or why your beer isn't working or why it's not clear or anything like that. And they will also help you with your recipes. So definitely make friends with the local brew shop. All right, well, we'll talk to you in just a few minutes when we get ready to transfer that into that. All right, so we're just right above 160 here. So I turn the burner off, and we are going to transfer this water from yaw into yaw. So the reason I go a little bit above 155 is that you will lose a little bit of temperature as you get it in here. Use your tube and just kind of stir it around so that you can get the water moving. This will also help get the grains soaked. So we're going to open the valve. And yes, this is hot water, so just be very careful that you're not going to dump it on the cat, because then the wife will be bad. I'm just going to kind of soak the grains, and then, like I said, we shoot for just a little bit above 160, so that way, by the time everything gets mixed up, it's going to be right around 155. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute, so you don't have to watch all of that just drain slowly into here. You could probably dump it in there if you were really that coordinated, but yeah, not really in the mood to burn myself. All right, we got all of our water in there. Regular plastic spoon. Stir it up, make sure you get the stuff from the bottom. This is about what you want to see, like a giant soup. Anyway, I'll figure out where to put this. We'll clean that up later. All right, let's get the lid on there. I know my mash tun pretty well, so this is going to hold about 155 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour. But if you are just starting this, I would highly advise you to check the temperature on this. Set your alarm for about 15 minutes. Check it again. If you don't have it up at a 155, you can always go ahead and add about a pot of boiling water, or like a tea kettle's worth of boiling water, and that'll bring the temperature up. But these ones, they don't leak very much, so this will maintain temperature for the full hour. I've done this many times before, so you can check it with one of these guys or one of these guys. I've been using these a lot more often than that, because this way I can check the middle temperature instead of just the outside. This one's broken. Anyway, one more thing. When you're brewing, you're dealing with a lot of heavy pots full of liquid. So make sure that if you're not up to the task of lifting 40-50 pounds, that you get some help. While we've got everything going, also brewing is the key in multitasking. So we've got this sterilizing right now. We'll grab some stuff to sterilize the other things, and I'm also using it as an opportunity to descale the coffee maker. So multitask. I'm gonna go turn on the football game here shortly, so yeah, and then we'll wait for about an hour, and then this will be ready to sparge. All right, here's an important lesson. 15 minutes left, 17 minutes, whatever. I just came to check my sparge water here. I turned on the wrong burner. So always make sure that you leave yourself a little bit of time. So now this is going to be on high, so I can get it warmed up in time to do that. All right, so we recovered. Our timer went off, and we're right around 175 to do this. So we're going to start swapping out the liquid in here. So here's the best way to do this. You've got step stool. I usually put a towel on there. I'm going to take my boil kettle, pop it over, and the first draw off of this, we're actually going to dump right back in. So we have our handy dandy little pitcher here that we're going to use to dip in here. We're also going to show you steam stuff coming off of there. It's about what it looks like. Now, if you start dumping water in this thing right away, it's not really going to work very well. You're going to get channels that go straight through. So that's where this guy comes in. So the first one that you dump in, careful, this water is very hot. We're just going to pour over the top. You can see that. Now, this is also going to start getting really hot, so be careful how often you touch it. If you take a look inside there, we are now basically making the grain its own filter. So the grain is going to be slowly filtering the sugar through here. So we want to basically run this about as slow as you can stand it. So that way you can get as much sugar out of it as you can. So for the first one, we're going to open it up just a little bit. I think my tube's probably a little bit too long, so we'll just kind of stretch it out. See this nice dark sugary goodness coming out of here. Like I said, we're going to be dumping this whole thing right back in, so don't be too worried about getting it super slow quite yet here. Man, that looks dark. That looks good. So you're going to fill up this pitcher here, and then we're going to close the valve. We're going to dump this right back in, and then we're going to start getting rid of the liquid there. So about 175, we're going to use that. I will keep recording here so that you can see the effects. Oh, she could smell this. It smells really good. My wife had the windows open, but it's getting kind of cold, so I closed the windows. She always complains that it smells like a brewery after I brew, and I'm like, yeah, I like it too. I don't think that's what she meant. All right, that's close enough, so we're going to close the valve. Drain off this stuff in here. Sorry, that's a nice shot of my cabinet. We're going to just dump that right there. And we're going to pour this right back in over the top. I don't know scientifically why you do this, to be perfectly honest. I just, this is how I've brewed for the last, 10 years or so. Just kind of dump it all right back in there. You can kind of see nice steamy goodness that is a stout. Now that we're doing that piece, this is kind of drained off a little bit. If you have somebody that can help you, great. If not, you can loop this tubing through one of these handles to kind of prevent it from jerking around. There's going to be quite a bit of air at the bottom of this thing. And I'll show you a little trick for getting all that yummy sugar out at the very, very end. But I'm going to loop it around there so that way it doesn't cause me any problems there. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and show you this trick right now. So when we are done and we are trying to squeeze out the last little bits of that sugar, the other advantage of using this style of a mash tun is that this lid to a standard baking dish goes right over the top, and you can squish it down and actually push all the sugar out. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. I'm going to start the sparge here, so we'll start rinsing the grain. So pour one right over the top. And again, the advantage of the holes is that we are not digging trenches through there. You can hear it kind of dripping and draining rather than having it cause problems. All right, so we'll start up our drain here. Don't worry, it will fill that tube up here in just a minute. If you're really that concerned about it, you can stretch it out and try to give it better angle to go down. But you can see all that yummy stout goodness coming through. So we're going to do this a couple times. And basically you're checking to make sure. So what this is doing, this hotter water here, is basically stopping the conversion of the sugar on the inside from the grain. So we're rinsing out the sugar to get it into there, and we're also stopping that chemical reaction coming out of the grain. So when you look at this in here now, don't know if you can see that, but you basically have about an inch and a half, 2 inches worth of water between the top part of the water and the grain bed, and that's basically your filter. So if we do this, we're going to do about right around 3 gallons. You are welcome to measure this with a gallon jug. As you can see, I've done this so many times that I basically have a little ring around there, and on my mash tun here, or sorry, my brew kettle here, right around there is a 3 gallon mark. So I'm doing about a 6-gallon total amount of water that's going to boil down. You are also going to lose some water in there. So you're never going to be able to get all the water out of that guy unless you have a lot more patience than I do. But this is kind of the trickle that we're talking about. It's not going super fast. This is a really dark beer. This is going to be fun. But you basically, you scoop this stuff up and you push as much of it through as you can, and then you're going to use this guy, and you'll have to put your weight on it to squeeze out all of that stuff. This is really helpful when you have two people, because you can have one person hold that and kind of tilt it, and then one person push really hard on that. Otherwise, you're going to have to kind of rig it. So I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to continue this part, and I will catch you back when we're getting ready to use that. Okay, we dumped the last little bit in there. Notice how much lighter it is coming out. So it was super dark when it was going in at first, and now we're starting to get kind of the lighter grains getting washed out. So we washed a lot of the stuff from the chocolate grains. We're done with this guy, but careful, it's still hot. There's one of these guys. I ended up using a couple pot holders and dumping the rest of it in there. Again, be very careful, this is very hot water. So now you can see that we are about ready for the good old squishy pot holder. Look at that, fits almost perfectly. Kind of set that guy in there. One thing that you could do for a little bit, that's enough weight until it gets down in there to just kind of push that stuff out. Now, don't open this up full throttle quite yet. If you do that, you will start getting a little bit of grain coming through here. We're only going to do that once it starts getting a little bit closer to being done. I will open it up a little bit more though. Start getting that flow going through there. But you can see that we have a couple little things of grain floating around in here, but not a whole lot. And part of that is because of the fact that we went super slow as we were going through this here. Now you could push down on this if you wanted to. And that's another advantage, is you have more leverage there. But we're going to let that kind of drain and go out and go through. But like I said, so the advantage of using this non-denominational cooler from a home improvement store is that you can find a lot of stuff that's going to fit in there. You can find a lot of different ways that you can modify this to do that. If you wanted to, you could drill a hole and put a temperature sensor in there so that you could know exactly how hot your stuff is going, so that you know if you need to add water or whatever, those types of things. Now, the next step is going to be, after we get all of the yummy sugar water out of there, we're going to pop it on top of the stove. I brew inside, so I have enough clearance between my microwave and my burner that I can do it inside. You can do this outside. It's not a big deal. You just get yourself a propane burner or something like that. That's what a lot of people do. But I'm in Colorado. I like to brew year round, so I can brew inside when it's too hot. I can brew inside when it's too cold. So I don't have to be a Goldilocks brewer. Anyway, looks like this is now no longer doing what we need it to do. Pop that guy right off. Put it down over here. Nice little piping arrangement. Now we're going to just lean on it. So you can kind of see that. You can lean on that. Now that is where we are going to start opening this thing up full bore. See how it's now totally done? Now we're going to open it up. I'm going to be pushing on this. I'm not going to be able to hold the camera while I do this, so just trust me, that's what I'm doing. We're going to get a lot of yummy liquid. All right, we are going to start boiling here pretty soon. I've got the correct burner on high. You notice that one's not turning red. Like an idiot, I did that on the wrong one the earlier time. So this is going to get up to about 220 degrees, and that will get that thing moving there. So we are doing it on the burner. Like I said, I've got the clearance here. Now, the one downside about doing this thing inside and having this totally open, if you're outside, you leave it open so that some of the water will evaporate, and that will make your beer a little bit more concentrated. Well, right now, the water that evaporates will collect on this bottom lip of the microwave and just basically drip back in. It's kind of gross if you think about all the nasty stuff that's on your microwave throughout. Probably should have cleaned that before I did the video, but who cares? So I just basically prop this guy open and let some of it come out that way, and then I'm protected. Anyway, we'll keep moving And I'll see you in just a few minutes when this thing starts to boil and we add hops and all the other stuff. Alright, so we're about 200-ish just before the boil. You're going to start getting this stuff here, this little film here. When you're doing a lighter beer, skim this stuff off and you'll actually get a clearer beer. I read some study a long time ago that that's what you would do. For a darker beer, it's not quite as important because that's basically an extra layer of proteins and stuff like that. So if you want to get some really good clear beer, that's one way that you can do it. So as you can see, if you were watching the timestamp on any of the other videos here, so it's taking quite a while to get that liquid up to the boil. So we're getting this kind of bubbly, frothy stuff here, and you can skim it off using just regular, just a spoon, and you skim it off, and you dump it in a bowl or something like that. So, all right, we're really close. About 5 minutes after I took the last video, we're starting to get that kind of stuff there. Again, if you're using a lighter beer, this is where you really want to get to this stuff, skim it off the top. So you can see that this is kind of this, milky proteiny stuff. And you can see that's about the consistency of it. So I'll go ahead and do it just so you can see kind of the process of it. But once this starts boiling, that's when a lot of timers come on. That's when you add your hops. That's when you add a couple of other different things there. But we'll do just, so there's flavoring hops and then there's aroma hops. So in this recipe, you do 1 ounce total of hops, and I'm going to dump them in all at the boil. So again, remember I was talking about that hop bag there. So here's another advantage of using this guy. Just popped it in there. So there's my leaf hops and my pellet hops. There's about a 1/2 ounce of Cascade and about a 1/2 ounce of Northern Brewer. So we're going to dump that stuff in there immediately. The lactose and the cocoa nibs go 15 minutes in. So, all right, we're boiling. So now we just toss the hops in there and we call it good. And I'm going to set this for 45 minutes. In 45 minutes, we are going to pop this in there to sterilize it. We're going to add this, and we're going to add this, and we're going to add this. All right, we're almost done with that first 45 minutes of the boil. So now we're going to add all the extra stuff. And I did some multitasking. Clean the mash tun. Did some cleaning out. Made sure that all that stuff was ready to go. So here's the order. We're going to need to put lactose in. We're going to need to put these cocoa nibs in. Now, if I put those in just the way they are, remember what we were talking about earlier with whole leaf hops? That's going to clog my filter. It's going to clog this guy right here. So, advantage number 685 with having the hop bag. Just pop it out. Go ahead and reach in there with your hand. No, we're going to use some tongs. And we're going to use this to just kind of store it in there while we get that stuff moving. An extra couple minutes here and there while it's boiling isn't going to be the end of the world. So this is definitely the best way to prevent any of that stuff from clogging up your filter. As you can see with the hop bag here, let it drain for a minute. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to toss the wort chiller in this boiling liquid to sterilize the wort chiller. Now I also rinsed that off with some nice warm water. I didn't need to use soap because I usually clean it off pretty much right away after I'm done using it so that it doesn't get all sticky. But there's going to be quite a bit of liquid still stuck in this hop bag, so we'll use the pitcher and dump it right back. Timer went off. We are done. So now it is time for us to use the wort chiller. First, we got to get the other stuff out. So okay, we'll slip back in. Tongs. Bag full of love. Let it drain, and then we're going to take this thing outside and we're going to connect the wort chiller up to the hose and get it down to temperature. So again, we're going to try to get this down to below 70 degrees before we pitch the yeast. And we're going to actually pitch the yeast inside the fermenter. So we're going to get this down below 70 degrees and then transfer over there. So next video will be when we're transferring into the primary. Here's how our wort chiller works. We're using cold water from a hose going through a bunch of coil of copper, and it's coming out of this side. If you feel this tube, it's actually kind of hot, stuff that's coming out of that spigot there. This is called the heat exchanger. So as the cold water goes through the copper, the hot water in the wort is actually
trying to heat that water up to bring it to equilibrium, which is what makes that hot. So this water coming out here is hot, as this cold water is pulling the heat away from the hot wort there. So we're going to let that get down to about 70 degrees. You can see that it has already dropped considerably and will continue to drop pretty quickly. So anyway, all right, so we're at about just over 70 something degrees, right around 80. We've got some in there. It's important to note that I use Star Sand, so there's always going to be some bubbles and stuff like that. This is not soap. So that is a food grade sanitizer. You don't rinse this stuff out, so don't worry about that. It's not soap. Here's how our stout looks. We're going to use our hydrometer. And it looks like we are right around, yummy, 1.055. I don't know if you can see that. And if we look at it as alcohol by volume, it's right around 5 or 6%. So it's just over 5% alcohol. All right, so we're going to transfer this into here by simply opening the valve, letting this all drain. Since I sterilized this, pop this guy out, give it a rinse. And then we're just going to dump that right back in. Save that. Taste it. Oh, it tastes delicious. Nice and chocolatey. So, this is going to change a little bit when the yeast gets a hold of it. So the yeast is going to convert all that sugar into alcohol. And we're going to know that we're done with the fermentation when this is close to water. So about 1.01 is what we're going to look at. So that's going to be when it's completely finished. So you can see that we're going to drain it into here before we pitch the yeast. Now, the other advantage of having this on here is it's going to tell us when we're ready to pitch the yeast. So we don't want to pitch it until it's in that 70 to 72 range. All right, it's going to cool down a little bit naturally as well. But typically this type of yeast you don't want to pitch unless it's right around 70 degrees. And then you just literally you cut open the top and you just drain it right in there. Then we'll take it downstairs, put the blow-off tube on there. We're going to go ahead and use the metal thing today and see how she works and get all that stuff going. All right, this is what yeast looks like. So this is what it looks like outside of the package. I'm using a British ale yeast, and it's about 78 degrees. Close enough. It's not going to be enough to hurt this, but it won't start fermenting until it gets down to about here. I'll take a video of it tomorrow morning when you can see it. This is kind of the natural aeration that you'll get. You'll get some bubbles and stuff like that. I did put some Irish moss in here, so the Irish moss is going to bind itself to some of the various other things that are in there and trap it and take it all to the bottom. Ale yeast is a top fermenter, so it's going to kind of hang out right up in here while it's fermenting, and then as it dies, it's going to sink to the bottom. So that's why when you rack it, especially from the primary, you want to make sure that you leave that little plastic nipple thing on the siphon so that you don't get the stuff that's going to settle down to the bottom. That's going to be another video for another day. So right now I'm going to pitch this, and I'm going to go ahead and get that into the primary. We'll take this thing downstairs in the basement, and I'll show you how we have the blow-off valve and all that stuff hooked up so that we don't have a very, very nasty, sticky mess when this stuff starts going. So see you soon. All right, so this is a shower in my basement that we don't really use. So this is my Christmas tree. But the advantage of doing something like this in a shower or a bathtub or something in a basement is it's about the same temperature year-round. If it does fill that up and go really crazy, I have a drain right there that we can clean. So this is kind of an extra bathroom. But you can see that I've got this blow-off valve plugged into the top part of that plastic cover there. It's coming down in, and there is some water in there so that as it goes through, it's going to bubble through. So that's kind of how you have this set up. And tomorrow morning, this will start to really mix up. So on my way down the stairs to the basement, the yeast got really nicely mixed up in there. You can kind of see that it also got rid of some of the aeration bubbles in there as well. So this is going to look really, really cool in the morning. and it actually looks like it's breathing. It's really neat. So I'll show you another video in the morning, and I will start editing all of these videos together and making it a little bit more digestible for you guys so that you can see it. So anyway, hope this was helpful, and we'll talk with you guys more tomorrow. And as we go through the process, I'll show you some of the other stuff. So with this beer, since it's a chocolate milk stout, I'm not going to rack it into a secondary. I'm just going to let it sit in this primary for quite a while. And then we'll just go ahead and keg it since I have an empty keg. So probably towards the end of the month. So we'll just let it sit. Anyway, cheers. All right, so this is about a day after we pitched the yeast. So we did that yesterday. And you can see you've got a layer of activity. Now, also hear the blow-off tube. You can see it kind of pulsating back and forth and almost breathing there. Those little dark flecks up on the top, that's the Irish moss, and that stuff will also start to settle down to the bottom. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can stir this around and make sure that the yeast gets nice and distributed throughout. You can do this several times during the primary and even during the secondary, but if you want your beer to be really clear, when you're getting ready to transfer it from the secondary into the keg and from the primary into the bottles or the keg or whatever you want to do, let it sit for a good solid 2 or 3 days. Let all that stuff settle to the bottom, and try your best not to get any of that stuff at the bottom into whatever your serving vessel will be. So I'm going to give this a stir. Just grab it and kind of shake it around. Make sure you don't let the stuff get out of there. I'm actually going to try to twist it a little, so it's hard to do with one hand in the video. So anyway, this is cranking away. Everything's looking really good for day one. So I'll check back in about a week when this is looking like it's slowing down and show you that process. So we're going to be racking stuff into the secondaries. So we have our auto siphon, a second carboy, airlock. We're going to test the gravity. So this has been sitting in the sterilizing fluid for just over an hour. So it should be ready to go. I'm going to go grab the chocolate milk stout and we will start transferring. One thing to note, if you get an auto siphon, make sure they have that little thing on the bottom. That's going to keep the sludgy stuff at the bottom of the beer from getting into your secondary. I'll show you what that looks like here shortly. Okay, so this has been sitting for about 2 weeks, so you can see dead yeast and hops and nasty stuff is at the bottom. I've already got my siphon in there. We are going to grab small samples so that we can test the gravity, and then we're going to take the rest of it and put it into the secondary. So we're right at about 1.02, which means it's gotten quite a bit of the sugar converted, but not all of it. We've got our auto siphon going into here. Now, if you disturb this, you will see little flecks of stuff going down in here. That's because you're disturbing that little bed there. I'm going to let it drain for a while, and then I kind of tilt it over. Now, something to be really careful about is these are glass, and they're very, very thick glass, but they also can break. So be very careful about messing around with glass when you don't have a whole lot of people around. So it's always best to do brews with a bunch of people that you can hang out with, or at least have somebody that can call the hospital in case you break one of these things and cut yourself. So happened to a friend of mine, he almost died, so be very careful with glass. But anyway, now here's the other thing. I am not going to dump this back into the secondary. I'm going to taste it, so I'm going to see how this stuff tastes. And then I've also got another beer there just for later. All right, we're done with the secondary transfer. Notice that there's going to be a little bit at the bottom, so you'll always lose a little bit of beer, but that's the stuff we don't really want. Like I said, it's like dead yeast and hop scoop and stuff like that. Here's kind of the volume that we have. You notice it looks pretty good and clear, but we're going to let it sit for about another 2 weeks. We're going to just use a standard airlock on this one, and how these things work is this has been sterilizing for a while, so you can see there's kind of a fill line on it, so go ahead and fill it up to that fill line. Pour a little bit of that stuff out, and then it's got this little cap. What that does is you're going to have this in here, and as the gas expands, this pops up and it lets the oxygen out, but it doesn't let any stuff go back in. So that's kind of how that little airlock works. Since we're doing a secondary, we can go ahead and use this. I'm not going to use a blow-off tube for a secondary. That's usually just a primary, because that's when you're going to get the most aggressive fermentation. So secondary is really just for clarifying it and letting it sit for another couple weeks. So 2 weeks I will clear out the keg, and then we will show you guys how to keg a beer and show you how to set up the CO2 tanks and all that fun stuff. So, all right, Enjoy.